Scott here.
You know what? You've gotta love a blue-haired swordsman. Fire Emblem's got plenty. Classic Marth. Ike's probably my favourite. Got Grimjow from Bleach. He's kinda cool. He was never my favourite, but he's alright. Yukanda, D. Greyman. Super underrated series. I love that show. Modern pick. Is his name Muichiro? The Mistasher from Demon Slayer. It's pretty nice. Oh, fuck! Sonic and the Black Knight, the second entry in the fabled Storybook Series. I don't think you can call it a series when it's 2 games, Sega, but alright. I think they really wanted it to be a trilogy. I swear in some media they did call it the Storybook Trilogy, despite that 3rd game never happening. I made it very clear in my Secret Rings video that I am not a fan of that game, and I haven't touched Black Knight since it came out, but I definitely did finish it as a kid. I remember doing that, so I must have liked it at least a little bit more, but let's check it out to see how it fares today. I put my name as Artie on the save file, like as in Artie, you know, the guy in Shrek 3, voiced by Justine Timberlake. I put Justine Timberlake in the script. It's his iconic femboy alter ego. The game begins with a girl being chased by some monsters in a fancy-looking night. She performs the spell to summon Sonic, and as a fun Easter egg, the spell is actually the same spell that the Eraser Djinn used in Secret Rings to summon the Ifrit boss, implying that Sonic is in fact a demonic entity, which absolutely tracks. He easily takes care of the beasts before taking on the knight, but he's whisked away by the girl since the knight is immortal. This is King Arthur, and his design goes unnecessarily hard, a recurring theme in this game of just things going hard when they had no need to go as hard as they did. We also see Shadow, Knuckles, and Blaze as knights here too. Like the aforementioned Secret Rings, Black Knight uses both CGI and storybook-esque cutscenes, but I vastly prefer the style this time around. The artwork just feels a lot clearer and more pleasing to the eyes in my opinion. The tutorial is about as basic as it gets, giving you the essentials on how to use the sword, beating enemies, which for the most part are just straight up demons, I forgot that, blocking attacks, and you even get a mini-boss with a dragon. Sonic manages to reach the sacred sword that the woman, who's named Melina, spoke about. The sword has a mind of its own and does not like Sonic one little bit, but the pair need to put their differences aside to fight King Arthur, who ambushes them. The fight isn't anything crazy, you run to him, swing your sword when instructed to, and that's about it. Turns out the talking sword has a name, it's Caliburn, and he'll serve as the equivalent of Sharla for this game, a talking companion to give Sonic advice and by extension, also teach things to the player. The next objective is to find the Lady of the Lake in order to learn how to put an end to the king. Going back to the gameplay, it's a massive improvement over what was in Secret Rings. You've got way more control over Sonic, including a much easier way of going backwards thanks to the quick backflip move. Although, very quick movements from side to side and going back can prove to be a little awkward from time to time.
Not the sharpest tool in the shed, huh?
Oh, hello there!
Melina drops a very heavy bomb about existentialism before parting ways. I'm sure there's nothing to worry about or look into there. You know, it is what it is. Anyway, controls. For the sword, they're really nothing special. It's almost entirely a waggle fest, or stick fest in my case, since I'm using a controller on my totally real Nintendo Wii. Wink wink, nudge nudge. The only thing the game really recognises from what I can gather are vertical and horizontal inputs, but it's extremely rare you need to swing the sword in a specific direction, which, on one hand, the basic nature of the sword combat is kinda disappointing, but on the other hand, I can't deny that just rushing through the level, just cutting through everything isn't super satisfying, especially the spinning slash move you can do in the air, that is just fucking broken. Sonic soon comes across a blacksmith who agrees to fix up Caliburn, and it's Tails, which again tracks, very on brand, and this unlocks a new gameplay feature, the Soul Surge. It's kinda similar to the speed and time break from Secret Rings. You collect red fairies to level the gauge up, with the yellow ones being bundles of rings. It lets Sonic zero in on a target and slash them precisely. You can just go ham with this on the ground or in the air, or you can time your attack when the sword glows and greatly reduce the gauge usage. It can be tricky to time, but again is pretty damn satisfying to pull off. The surge also acts as a boost if no enemies are in range. The next level introduces some recurring gimmicks that can crop up through the game. On-rail sections where you need to slash at jumping enemies in time, and NPC interactions doing little quick time events to give them rings in exchange for gifts. We've got yet another boss fight against Lancelot, with Shadow taking on that role, with them using Throw It All Away, his theme from Sonic Adventure 2, as background music for the cutscene. Black Knight does this pretty regularly, using previous character themes or soundtracks from previous games, and I love it. Now, the game wants you to wait until the boss does a few attack strings and strike once after, but you can absolutely get away with just going monkey mode on them and just throwing that Wii remote around like it's nobody's business. It's the same with Gwaine, who's Knuckles. They go even deeper with the character parallels here, with him thinking that Sonic is lying to him just to get treasure, with Unknown From Me blasting in the background the entire time. He goes down just as easily as Lancelot, and once beaten, he has a little mental episode and tries to off himself, to which Sonic says,
Give me a break!
This cutscene puts me on my arse every time without fail. I think it's the delivery of the "give me a break" that just, that really does it for me. I gotta say, I do actually like how Caliburn and Sonic's relationship progresses together, the former being very stern and proper, whilst the latter is carefree and relaxed. I don't think Caliburn's an amazing character or anything, and their dynamic is admittedly pretty simple, but it works, and the dialogue between them can be fun. The next few levels all stem from Sonic putting the need of saving the townspeople above meeting the Lady of the Lake, something the Talking Sword greatly objects to, but he is in the right. Sonic would never turn away those who help anyway, and it's an excellent little bit of character writing for him. Turns out it was the right decision. It was all a trial set up by the lady, who resembles Amy. She explains that he needs Lancelot, Gawain, and Percival's swords together to sever King Arthur's link to his immortality, and we've got 2 out of the 3, meaning Sonic is gunning for Percival in the Molten Mine, and oh boy, the theme is a certified banger. The soundtrack has been pretty fantastic so far. I'll talk a little bit more about it later, but this song is a big standout. I'll play a little bit for you now.
Sure, whatever you say.
It's actually a remix of a track from a game called Black Dawn on the Sega Saturn and PS1. Amazing song, as well as the music for Sonic's cutscene with Percival. Everything about this cutscene is perfect. Like I say, the song, the Night of the Wind name drop, it's Kino. It's a fitting title for Sonic here. Honestly, I talked a little bit about how his character writing had been really good in certain scenes, but his characterization in general has been phenomenal. It's by far Jason Griffith's best performance as the character in my mind.
Knight of the Wind, prepare for battle. Bring it on.
With all 3 swords collected, it's time to fight King Arthur, for real this time. I suppose this implies that Sonic is generally, fine with murder if the situation calls for it? I guess. I mean, what's keeping him from popping a cap in Eggman at this point, really? Maybe Shadow the Hedgehog wasn't so far-fetched after all. Anyway, on to the boss. With a vocal version of the song that played in his first encounter, Fight the Knight, Crush 40 going hard as always, it's not much harder than the original encounter. It's a matter of smacking his attacks back at him to gain Soul Surge, boosting to him and slashing once his sword turns gold. The timing on some of his second phase slashes can be finicky, and sometimes boosting can cause some weird bugs to happen. Sometimes Sonic will just run along for way longer than he's supposed to, but apart from those, it's not anything complex in terms of boss fights. Ultimately, Sonic comes out on top, killing King Arthur and triumphantly ending the game on its main theme, Night of the Wind. Except that's a lie. If you go back to the world map, a new section marked in red has appeared at the Knight's Passage, so let's have a gander at what that's all about. King Arthur vanished like the many monsters throughout the game because King Arthur was never real. He was an illusion created by Melina's grandfather, and once the scabbard he carried is returned to her by Sonic, she can enact her real plan to create an eternal kingdom. The castle crumbles around them, so Sonic and the three knights escape in one of the coolest CG cutscenes in the franchise, and with their world in jeopardy, Sonic, Lancelot, Gawain and Percival decide to team up, meaning that they're now playable characters in select levels. And as an aside, about my earlier comment about Sonic being okay with killing King Arthur, I don't think he knew that he was a fictional thing. I don't think he knew he was like an illusion. I think he thought he was just like a normal guy, so... Does that still imply he's okay with murking people? Sega, please respond. Let's start with Lancelot. Oh, fuck it. I'm just gonna call them by their proper names. I'm sick of calling them by the knight names. So let's start with Shadow. He plays the most similarly to Sonic, except he's more stop and go with his attacks, so he's not quite as fluid as Sonic feels. That's a problem all the other characters have, to be honest. They just don't feel nearly as fluid and fast to move around with as Sonic, which Shadow definitely should. Shadow's attacks might be a bit stronger. I think that's probably down to the more intense animations and voice work he has. Like, Jason Griffith, again, going hard with the grunts that Shadow's making. Like, man is out for blood in this game. His Soul Surge is a Chaos Control type move dubbed Chaos Punishment, which, again, ongoing element of this game, goes hard as fuck. Knuckles naturally has a glide instead of a homing attack, and his Soul Surge is the most unique, being a projectile, throwing his swords around instead of doing continuous slashes, though will still boost if no enemies are nearby. His glide attack can be useful, but at the same time it's really awkward to get him to aim at specific targets because of the angle he dives down in. Blaze doesn't have a homing attack either, really. She does sometimes, only when enemies are nearby, but she primarily has this weird double jump that just halts her speed and momentum. She doesn't move at all when attacking either, with the exception of one combo ender where she just warps forward, and an aerial attack that boosts her straight forward as well. Her Soul Surge is similar to Sonic and Shadow's, wrapping herself in a fire tornado that propels her forward if no enemies are targeted. If I had to rank my favourite characters to play, it would be Knuckles at the bottom, then Blaze, then Shadow, and Sonic by a country mile. One mission in the latter half of the game that really stood out to me at this point was a boss fight against a dragon, which, with its attack patterns being orbs and its general design, I'm pretty sure it's meant to be a reference to the Bio Lizard from Adventure 2, so naturally I had to pick Shadow to fight it. The last phase is really fucking tedious though, with just the amount of stuff on screen at once. It gets really annoying. With the dragon slayed, Sonic can confront Melina. That little existential bit from early in the video wasn't just a weird throwaway line. Melina's want for an eternal kingdom stems from her knowing how the story of King Arthur ends. That her kingdom, and everything she knows, is destined to fade away, and it understandably terrifies her. Sonic argues that a world and a life that continues endlessly isn't healthy, and that things ending is just natural. He's initially beaten, with Caliburn snapped in two, but with the power of the three swords, and it doesn't matter blasting in the background, he's powered up, and in a shonen as all hell cutscene, he's transformed into Excalibur Sonic for the final boss against Melina, the Dark Queen.
That's the greatest of the sacred swords! Excalibur!
Let's do this!
You would not understand, nor could you understand. That's why I must do what I must do. I am finished with you.
What is a world that goes on forever? That sounds pretty neat. Dodging.
one of the best songs in the game serves as the theme with me. The fight is again rather simple, slashing through a barrier to bounce orbs back at her, parrying her slashes and building up gauge to just absolutely decimate her. After the fight, Sonic reconnects with her, given what is honestly an extremely moving speech. I'm completely genuine here.
Every world has its end. I know that's kind of sad, but that's why we gotta live life to the fullest in the time we have. At least, that's what I figure.
The game ends on the revelation that since Caliburn decides who is king, Sonic is now King Arthur, ending on the credits theme, Live Life by Crush 40 again. A genuinely moving rock ballad about the beauty of living in the moment and appreciating the good things you have. I think it's also kind of fitting that this game is the last one where Crush 40 have a really big presence as well. That's really sad. They did have one song in the Team Sonic Racing spin-off as like the main theme, but that's the only time recently they've been front and center in a game soundtrack, and having this to, I guess, go out on is, you know, it's bittersweet. After the credits, it cuts to Sonic retelling the story to Amy, who doesn't believe him, thinking it's just a bad excuse to get out of a date with her, resulting in her trying to smack him with a hammer, a very valid reason for attempted murder, I'm sure we'll all agree. Now the game does have other modes. You've got the usual common ones for the time. The fact these aren't common anymore without paying for them is kind of depressing, but anyway. There's a gallery, soundtrack, artwork, even actual retellings of Arthurian stories. There's a multiplayer mode, but you can't find CPUs in it, so I didn't get a chance to try it out for this video, unfortunately. You do get a bunch of extra challenging missions, which I didn't bother with for the most part, since they're really tedious instead of like a fun kind of challenging, but I did do a couple. You do get rematches with stronger versions of some of the bosses, all still cheesable, just in different ways. Also, as a little side note, you can get equipable items, and some change the music, so being able to replay the levels with All Hail Shadow is a big plus from me. It's just a shame that it isn't the full version of the song. Overall, I do genuinely think Sonic and the Black Knight is a decent game. Don't get me wrong, it's far from perfect, but it's not nearly as bad as people say it is, and miles better than Secret Rings. I think the biggest issue is that people have dismissed the game over the premise or the visual of Sonic with a sword alone. Granted, it is kind of mental, but I do think Sonic and the Black Knight is genuinely worth at least giving one honest try. And trying to put that, you know, insane mental image aside and just trying the game for what it is. I genuinely believe this is a title that doesn't deserve to be forgotten.